Hello devs, welcome again. We'll continue from where we left. That was creating the project setup locally. So next thing we'll try to see how templating works in Vue.js. So how do you write your markup in Vue.js? So I'll just try to remove this first. Then if I come here, you'll see we need at least one template or script is required in a single file component. So what this means is we have this app. So for this app, we'll need to set up a template. Have a template. Then for this template is now where we have our markup written. So any valid JavaScript is just okay to be here. Then you can see now we have hello here. So you can literally write anything here. So let's say we have p, say lorem 20 to the end. Then you can see we have lorem printed out here. So we had in our assets here main.css, so I can just write here star comma star before comma star after, then we can have a p0 m0 box sizing border box. So these are some of the presets I usually put in place when I'm writing out HTML or whichever code I'm writing, to just try to remove out any padding or margin that is auto applied to a given element. So once that is applied, next we'll need to, because there are ways in which we can render different things. So you'll see that most of the time we'll be writing a lot of JavaScript, then we compute the logic back to the HTML section. So that's why now we'll need the script section. So we can have a script setup, then we can just have a language TS here, but you can just write it in normal JavaScript, it will still work even without the lang. So this setup is really important. So from here we can have a variable like name. So these are just primitives, so we can say name is view Evan just confirm so we have Evan here. This is the creator of Vue.js. Then the way we can show this to, let me just drag this to the side here so that we can also have this on this other end. So I can close this because it's no longer needed. So I just drag this to the bottom and this to the top, then extend this other side here, then close that one. So with this you can now see we have a simple markup here that is rendered. So you can just remove this p section so that we have hello. So with this hello, if we want to show this name to the UI, whatever we'll do in here, whatever is written in JavaScript, now for us to show it in the HTML section we need to use mustache syntax, so that is double braces, curly braces, that is. So then we can just pass here the name, and it should be able to show here. So that's how now you can write this. So you are not limited to only have maybe the variables which are here to be shown here. So what you can have on that is from here. Then now you can, let's say, created view yes on. So meaning whatever we have here is that we can just have a dummy expression here. You can have maybe new get, so any valid JavaScript should be able to work here. You can have your expressions here. So any valid JavaScript expression should be able to work here. So maybe just do date so I've just switched it to, let me just have this as P. So if you face this kind of issue of changing a single tag, there's an extension for doing this, which is auto rename. So we have auto rename. So apparently this isn't syncing. Auto, don't have internet connection. Let me just switch my internet. So we have auto rename. So we have this auto rename, then we also auto close this. So these two are really important when you're working with HTML. So I just kind of close this. Then now if I change this to, just undo, if I change this to P, it should be able to change for this other one also. So if I just maybe try, you can see we have hello we have a new created VJS on, although this is now the current date on this end. So you can just wrap this with the main, then we'll try, for us to style this, you add a style section, then you can just add a main, then we have a padding of maybe 10, and then we have our page padded here. So with this you can write any JavaScript expression, it should still work, and you can reference any variables that are set here. Another interesting thing about this is if you're working with something like let's say const long row HTML, have some sample here. So with this we can house it in just this variable. So if you have this and you want to show it here, you can have your paragraph, then you have long row HTML. Then if you save, you'll see you have this weird looking HTML. So for us to be able to maybe escape these ones, we need to apply a very important directive on this. So I think we'll talk on directives later, but let me just add this here. So we can write v-html, then we pass this here, then we can remove it from this point. Then you can see the magic that Vue.js does under the hood to swap that. So in here you don't need to pass any items in here. You just pass the v-html and you pass the long HTML. So you should only be able to do this when you know very well that this comes from a legitimate source that someone like you trust, and you can have SQL injection, or this is prone to security breaches, so you be careful with this. So so that does it for this part. So I can extract this to maybe a component here, let's say maybe starter.view, then we can just paste here. So then if we get back to our app.view, if we save, there will be nothing. Then now we can proceed to create a sample view with React.js. Then because we have everything already set up here, I think now we understand the portion for each and every section. So I like just having JavaScript in the first section of this application. And for the style, you can see we have the scoped, and you can remove the scoped. So scoped just means if you apply scoped, whatever styles will be applied on this component will not overlap to any other component within the tree. So if we say here hello h1 hello, then I style h1 color red. So this will be able to just pick color automatically here, but I won't be doing the styling at this point. So what I'll do, I just need to install Tailwind. But before I head over to Tailwind, we can check on some concepts here known as attribute bindings. So attribute bindings are things like ID, the names. So there's dynamic binding and you can also do static binding. So let's take for instance, if you have this element, then you can, for you to do a binding, you can write v bind. So what are you binding? It says I'm binding, let's say class. Okay, so I'm binding a class. Then now you provide the attributes here, the values here. So we can say maybe h1, let's say h1 element. if I pick this h1 element, then come here and add a dot, then you can see we still have, let's say, green. You'll see we still have green here. So you can do attribute binding, so you can bind a class, you can bind id, so you can run a v bind. So what are you binding? You bind id, so you can bind any attribute, then you say h1 id. So if I pass this h1 id and z, you know very well that IDs take precedence in styling, so we can just color this maybe purple. Then you can see now h1 ID takes precedence over this, so you can see in the specificity here, you can see 1 is higher than 0, 0, 1, 0, so 1 is on the higher end, and on this the specificity is on the lower end, so that's why you can see the h1. So we just bound the id of this, but still you can have it as id is equals to some id. So usually for bindings we usually prefer doing the dynamic binding over this static bind. So if you're doing the static binding, it's just okay to write it as this. If you're doing dynamic binding, you can always do it in this manner. So so at this point we are using this vbind, but a shortcut for doing it is you can use instead of vbind, you can just exclude this vbind and remain with the colon and just the id. So if you save, this should still work, and if you remove this one also, this should still work. So that's how now you can do dynamic bindings. You can also do inline styling of you can do inline style, let's say background color of, let's say, blue. That should be able to still apply on this. So you can just continue adding more, let's say text decoration, let's say wavy, then save, let's say underline. Then you can see this has gotten underlined. So you can just have as many attributes as you wish, and if you want to dynamically bind them, you can always use this bind syntax. So this is now how you bind attributes to maybe a dynamic value. You'll see how we'll be doing this later on for switching classes and based on a given condition and having a default class. So if you're binding, it will usually take precedence. So what you dynamically bind will take precedence of whatever you had provided initially. So let's say you had a component that checks status of maybe a transaction, default, maybe you have a gray background. Then now if it's completed or something like that, then now you need to change the color of the background based on the status that you're getting. Those you can always achieve through this type of binding. So if now you're working with the same name, if you're binding an attribute, let's say ID, that is labeled as ID, you can always just use ID, and that should still work, but you not need to remove this one. So if you put it like this, this means this ID is bound to the ID itself. So the name will be ID, and just like if you say maybe person is supposed to be that, then now if you now want to reference this person, then you can say something like const users is equals to, then instead of saying person, now you can just use the one side of the person, then that's how this will operate. So I think that's straightforward. For the case of, let's say you have a button, then you have maybe a condition of first is loading, let's have it as false. Then if this button you want a disable status, disabled, so if you want to disable this button when we have a loading status, then now you can just say disabled, then you pass is loading. Okay, when you pass is loading, then now we can just say maybe click me. Then if you can click, but when you click on it, it's loading false. But now when I change this to, let me just add a style in as button, which if disabled, we should say cursor not allowed, not allowed. So this should be able to change this. So for now we can click it, then if we now change this to true, then it should change everything. You can see now it's disabled, so you can't click through it. So this is how now you can do dynamic binding of attributes. So we can also have some kind of conditions in this, where you you want to maybe check a condition. Let's say you have a p, and let's say const age is let's say 12. Then you want to say we can say age, you can have age, let's say person of age that, let's say age. Okay, then on this end we can have something like is then on this end what we'll have is age greater than 0, greater than, let's say 18. Then we can always use this is, let's say is an adult, else is a child. So greater than or equal to else. So you can see now we can do inline expressions for writing this. So when now you want to evaluate this, you can always have this. So let's say if 12 now is a child, person of age 12 is a child, and if we change this now to maybe 18, you should be able to switch this to is an adult. So this is one of the ways that you can be able to process some of these things. So still the things known as directives. So I think this file is getting messy. So let's have these as just templates. Extract this to what we call templates. View, then paste. Then from here, I think we'll continue from here. Now from this point, now we'll move to Vue.js directives. We've handled whatever we handled here is HTML. We've done a bit of HTML. From HTML, we've seen how you can pass raw HTML. Then we've also seen how to add attributes. Then we've seen also how to style. We've seen also how to so this one is for static stroke dynamic. So we have both static and dynamic. We've seen also to style. There's a global, which we don't have no scoped, or now the scoped, which is scoped to component level. So those are some of the things we've discussed in this. So I think we can wrap this here. Then now we can proceed to other things. So let's wrap it here, and we can see on something else later. So until then, if you have any questions, you can just post in the comment section so that I may be able to answer them or maybe tackle them in the next videos.